Picture this, you're sitting in your bedroom working alone on your computer at 3 a.m., fueled by nothing but caffeine and pure determination. Now imagine that same project goes on to make you a billionaire and becomes the best-selling game of all time. That's exactly what happened with Marcus Notch Persson with Minecraft, but he's not alone. Some of gaming's most beloved, most influential, and most successful titles were created by just one person. And today we're diving deep into the incredible world of solo game development. And trust me, these stories might just blow your mind. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Olive Badger, and I'm absolutely fascinated by the power of individual creativity, especially in an industry where AAA games now require teams of thousands and budgets in the hundreds of millions. Yet, somehow, some of the most innovative, memorable, and financially successful games in history were made by lone developers working in their spare time, often with little to no budget. From the legendary Tetris that defined an entire generation of gaming to modern indie darlings like Stardew Valley that rival any AAA production in terms of player engagement and critical acclaim, solo developers have consistently punched way above their weight class. But what makes these games so special? Well, what drives someone to spend years of their life working on a project alone with no guarantee of success? And how do they manage to compete with massive studios? Today we're going to explore the most incredible games ever made by single developers and the stories behind their creation, as well as what we can learn from these digital David versus Goliath tales. Let's start with the games that laid the groundwork for everything that came after. These are the titles that proved a single person could create something truly world-changing. First up, Tetris, the Accidental Empire. In 1984, a Russian computer scientist named Alexey Pajitnov was working at the Moscow Medical Institute when he created what would become the most recognizable video game of all time. His main goal was simple: create games that made people happy. Using just 7 geometric shapes that he called tetrominoes, he crafted a puzzle game so addictive that it had to be banned from his workplace because it was preventing people from getting work done. Think about that for a second. This man created a game so compelling in its simplicity that it literally disrupted an entire medical institution. Tetris went on to become one of the most ported, most studied, and most commercially successful games ever made. It's been released on virtually every gaming platform that's ever existed, and its core gameplay loop remains completely unchanged from the original 1984 vision. What's remarkable about Tetris is how it demonstrates the power of pure game design. There's no story, no characters, no complex mechanics, just falling blocks and the human brain's natural desire to create order from chaos. It is mathematical poetry in motion. Next up, Cave Story, the 5-year labor of love. Fast forward to 2004, and we meet Daisuke Pixel Amaya, a Japanese developer who spent 5 years of his free time creating what many consider the gold standard for indie game development. Cave Story wasn't just programmed by Amaya, he created every single asset. The art, the music, the sound effects, the story, the programming, everything came from one person's vision. And here's what makes this even more incredible. He didn't use any existing game engines. He built his own tools from scratch using C++, creating his own graphics engine, audio engine, and level editor. This is like not just building a house, but first inventing your own hammers, saws, and blueprints. After 5 years of work, what did he do with his masterpiece? He gave it away for free. Cave Story became a phenomenon in Japan, was translated into English, and inspired an entire generation of indie developers. It proved that with enough passion and dedication, a single person could create something that rivaled the best that major studios had to offer. You know we've got to talk about it, guys, the Minecraft phenomenon. Because perhaps no solo developed game has had a bigger impact on both gaming and pop culture than Minecraft. In 2009, Marcus Notch Persson was working at a Swedish web development company when he started experimenting with a blocky world building game in his spare time. Inspired by games like Infiniminer and Dwarf Fortress, he wanted to create something that combined the visual appeal of building blocks with deeper RPG elements. Notch didn't just code Minecraft, he built his own game engine from scratch using Java. Java. He started with the most basic concept imaginable: place blocks, break blocks, survive. But there was something truly magical about the combination of infinite procedurally generated worlds, complete with creative freedom and the fundamental human joy of building things. The alpha version of Minecraft became an overnight sensation. Players started sharing their creations online, and word spread like wildfire. Notch quit his day job and eventually founded Mojang to support the game's development. By 2014, when Microsoft acquired Mojang for $2.5 billion, Minecraft had become the best-selling video game of all time, and Notch had joined the ranks of Forbes billionaires. What's extraordinary about Minecraft's success is how it demonstrates the power of emergent gameplay. Notch created the tools, but the players have the magic. People have built working computers inside Minecraft, recreated various landmarks, and even developed their own programming languages within the game. It's a testament to what happens when you give players pure creative freedom. While some solo developers focused on creating addictive gameplay loops, others used the medium to push artistic and narrative boundaries in ways that larger studios just simply couldn't or wouldn't attempt. Which brings us to Papers, Please, Bureaucracy as Art. In 2013, Lucas Pope, a former Naughty Dog developer who had worked on the Uncharted series, released something completely unprecedented: a game about checking passports. Papers, Please casts you as an immigration inspector in a fictional Eastern European country, and your job is to process travelers trying to cross the border. On the surface, it sounds mind-numbingly boring, right? But Pope crafted something pretty profound, a game that uses the mundane act of paperwork to explore themes of moral compromise, economic desperation, and the human cost of bureaucracy. Every decision you make in the game has consequences. Do you let through the person with slightly incorrect paperwork because they're clearly desperate? Do you prioritize speed to earn more money for your family, even if it means making mistakes? Or do you accept bribes to supplement your meager income? Pope developed Papers, Please entirely by himself over 9 months, funding the project with his personal savings from his time at Naughty Dog. He deliberately made the user interface clunky and frustrating, turning the limitations of bureaucracy into a core gameplay mechanic. The game won a BAFTA award and has been praised as an example of video games as high art. What makes Papers, Please so remarkable is how it proves that video games can tackle serious subjects in ways that other media just simply can't. By making the player complicit in the system, Pope created an empathy machine that forces you to understand the moral complexities of border control in a visceral, personal way. Next up, we have Braid: Time, Regret, and Innovation. Jonathan Blow spent over 3 years developing Braid, a puzzle platformer that looks like a simple Mario-style game, but operates on completely different principles. Each world in Braid manipulates time in unique ways. You might rewind time to undo mistakes, or find that certain objects are immune to temporal manipulations, or discover that your actions create shadow versions of yourself that replay your movements. Braid isn't just about clever mechanics either. It's a meditation on regret, relationships, and the desire to fix our own mistakes. The story told through sparse text passages slowly reveals the darker implications of Tim's quest to rescue a princess. He deliberately created Braid to challenge players in ways that most games don't, believing that the medium had become too focused on making players feel good about themselves rather than genuinely challenging them. The game's success helped kickstart the modern indie game movement. When Braid became one of Xbox Live Arcade's most successful titles, it proved that there was a hungry audience for innovative, artistic games that didn't fit the traditional AAA mold. Publishers and platform holders suddenly started paying attention to independent developers in ways they never had before. Next up is Undertale, the power of player choice. Toby Fox created Undertale with a simple but revolutionary premise. What if you could complete an RPG without killing anyone? This question led to one of the most emotionally powerful games ever made, where every encounter with an enemy can be resolved through understanding, patience, and creativity rather than violence. Fox composed all the music, wrote all the dialogue, and programmed the entire game himself. But what makes Undertale special isn't just its technical achievement, it's how deeply it understands and subverts player expectations. The game remembers everything you do, even across multiple playthroughs. If you choose violence, the characters will remember. If you show mercy, they'll remember that too. The game's meta-narrative elements broke new ground in how video games could tell stories. Characters acknowledge that they're in a video game. The game's saves and loads become plot points, and your choices as a player become the central theme of the narrative. It's a game that could only exist as a video game, using the interactive nature of the medium to tell its story in ways that no other art form could replicate. As game development tools have become more accessible and digital distribution platforms have lowered barriers to entry, we've seen an explosion of incredible solo-developed games in recent years. As much as I hate this game because it's not for me, I do have to talk about Stardew Valley because it did perfect a formula. Eric Barone, known online as Concerned Ape, spent 4 years creating what many consider the perfect farming simulation game. Inspired by the Harvest Moon series, he set out to create the farming game he always wanted to play. What he ended up with was something that surpassed its inspiration in almost every way. He taught himself how to program, how to create pixel art, and how to compose music specifically for this project. He worked alone for the entire development process, often putting in 10-hour days while living with his girlfriend and surviving on minimal income. The attention to detail in Stardew Valley is extraordinary. Every character has a detailed backstory. Every season brings new events and activities, and the game systems are all interconnected in satisfying ways. When Stardew Valley launched in 2016, it became an immediate phenomenon. It showed that there was still a massive audience for cozy, relaxing games that prioritize player expression and creativity over competition and conflict. The game to date has sold over 20 million copies and continues to receive free updates that add substantial new content. What's remarkable about Stardew Valley's success is how it demonstrates the power of passion and patience. Barone didn't rush to market with a minimal viable product. He spent years polishing every aspect of the game until it felt perfect. The result is a game that feels like it was made by a much larger team, but retains the coherent vision that only comes from a single creative mind. Up next, we have Axiom Verge, the Metroidvania master. Thomas Happ spent 5 years creating Axiom Verge, a love letter to classic Metroid games, and it somehow manages to feel both nostalgic and completely fresh. Like the other developers we've discussed, Happ handled every aspect of development himself: programming, art, music, and sound design. What makes Axiom Verge special is how it captures the feeling of exploring an alien world. The game's glitch mechanics, where you can corrupt enemies and environments to reveal secrets and solve puzzles, create a unique sense of discovery that's perfectly integrated with the game's narrative about a scientist trapped in a deteriorating digital world. Happ's background as a programmer at Petroglyph Games gave him the technical skills to create something that Looks and feels like a lost classic from the 16-bit era, but with modern game design sensibilities. The game received critical acclaim and commercial success, proving that there's still an audience for challenging, exploration-focused games. Let's take a look at some of 2024's breakouts, because that year alone, last year, 2025 is not done yet, that year has given us several incredible examples of what solo developers can achieve. Animal Well, created by Billy Basso over 7 years, is an atmospheric Metroidvania that uses clever lighting and animation techniques to create a world that feels alive and mysterious. Every screen is carefully crafted, and the game's puzzles often extend beyond the game itself, requiring players to work together to solve community-wide mysteries. Balatro, developed by Local Thunk, takes the basic rules of poker and transforms them into an addictive roguelike deck builder. The developer spent 2.5 years refining the game's mathematical systems to create something that's both easy to understand and incredibly deep. The game became an immediate sensation, proving that innovative mechanics can still capture players' imaginations. Creating a game as a solo developer isn't just about having good ideas. It requires mastering an incredibly diverse set of skills and overcoming challenges that would break most people. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't go for it, right? Think about what's required to create a modern video game. You need programming skills to make the game function. You need artistic ability to create visually appealing graphics and animation. You need musical talent to compose soundtracks and create sound effects. You need writing skills to craft compelling narratives and dialogue. You need game design experts to create fun, balanced gameplay systems. You need project management skills to organize your work and meet deadlines. You need marketing knowledge to get people to notice your game once it's finished, and the list could go on and on and on. Most people spend their entire careers mastering just one of these disciplines. Solo developers have to become competent in all of them. Eric Barone literally taught himself programming, pixel art, and music composition from scratch for Stardew Valley. Daisuke Maya created his own game engine and development tools for Cave Story. These aren't just game developers, they're digital renaissance artists. But perhaps even more challenging than the technical requirement is the psychological endurance needed to complete a solo project. Most of these games take years to develop, during which the developer is working alone, often without any guarantee that anyone will play or buy their creation. There's no team to provide feedback, no colleagues to share the burden, and no boss to set deadlines or provide structure. Lucas Pope spent 9 months working on Papers, Please, funding the project with his personal savings while living in Japan. Thomas Happ worked on Axiom Verge for 5 years as a side project while maintaining a full-time job. Eric Barone put in 10-hour days for 4 years, often living on a minimal income and dealing with constant uncertainty of whether his project would ever find an audience. The psychological pressure can be enormous. Imposter syndrome, creative blocks, and simple burnout are constant threats. Many promising solo projects never see completion because the developer simply can't sustain the motivation and energy required to see it through. But for those who do manage to complete their project, the rewards go beyond just financial success. Solo development offers something that's increasingly rare in the modern game industry: complete creative control. There are no executives demanding changes to appeal to focus groups, no marketing departments insisting on monetization schemes, no producers worried about competing with similar games in the market. This creative freedom often leads to the most innovative and personal games. Papers, Please could never have been made by a committee. It required Pope's specific vision and willingness to make players uncomfortable. Minecraft's open-ended design philosophy might have been diluted by corporate oversight, and Undertale's willingness to break conventional RPG rules could have been compromised by risk-averse publishers. Many successful solo developers also emphasize the importance of building relationships with their community during development. Jonathan Blow shared updates about Braid's development on indie game forums and received valuable feedback. Lucas Pope posted regular development logs that helped build anticipation for Papers, Please. Eric Barone was active on social media throughout Stardew Valley's development, sharing screenshots and development updates that helped build a dedicated fan base before the game even launched. This direct connection between developer and players creates a different kind of relationship than what's possible with large studio productions. Players feel invested in the developer's success because they've been part of the journey. The developer receives immediate feedback and validation that helps sustain motivation during the difficult development process. And one of the most frequent questions about solo game development is simply, how is this possible? How can one person create games that compete with productions from teams of hundreds? The answer lies partly in the democratization of game development tools. In the 1980s and 90s, creating a video game required deep technical knowledge and often expensive specialized hardware. Today, powerful game engines like Unity, Unreal Engine, and Godot are available for free. Digital art tools like Photoshop, Blender have made high-quality asset creation accessible to individual creators. Music production software allows anyone to compose professional-sounding soundtracks from their bedroom. And it's not just about the tools, it's about knowledge platforms like Platforms like YouTube, Udemy, and countless online tutorials have made it possible for anyone to learn game development skills. The same internet that allows solo developers to distribute their games also provides them with the educational resources to create them in the first place. Successful solo developers also tend to be masters of scope management. They understand their limitations and design around them. Rather than trying to compete with AAA games on technical complexity or content volume, they focus on creating experiences that feel polished and complete within their constraints. Vampire Survivors is essentially a single screen with waves of enemies, but the mathematical precision of its progression systems creates an incredibly compelling gameplay loop. Papers, Please uses simple pixel art and basic UI elements, but the strength of its concept and execution makes these limitations invisible to players. Modern solo developers also benefit from robust asset stores and open source communities. Instead of creating every texture, sound effect, and code library from scratch, developers can license or freely use assets created by others. This allows them to focus their limited time on the unique aspects of their game rather than recreating common functionality. However, it's important to note the most successful solo games tend to have strong, cohesive visual and audio identities. This often means that while developers might use some external assets for basic functionality, they oftentimes create their own art and music to ensure their game has a distinctive personality. Creating a game is only half the battle. Solo developers also have to navigate the complex world of game publishing, marketing, and business management. The rise of digital platforms like Steam, itch.io, and mobile app stores has been crucial to the success of solo developers. Before these platforms existed, getting a game to the market required convincing a publisher to handle manufacturing, distribution, and retail relationships. This created a massive barrier to entry that excluded most independent developers. Today, a solo developer can upload their game to Steam in the morning and have players purchasing it by afternoon. The democratization of distribution has been just as important as the democratization of development tools in enabling the current indie game renaissance. But distribution is just the beginning. With thousands of games released every month, getting noticed is perhaps the biggest challenge facing solo developers. Traditional marketing approaches like advertising campaigns and PR agencies are often beyond the budget of independent developers. Successful solo developers have had to become masters at grassroots marketing. They build social media followings by sharing development updates and behind-the-scenes content. They'll engage with gaming communities on Reddit, Discord, and specialized forums. They sometimes reach out to streamers and YouTubers who might be interested in featuring their games. The personal stories behind solo-developed games often become part of their marketing appeal. Players are more likely to support a game when they know it represents years of one person's passion and dedication. The human element becomes a competitive advantage that large studios just can't easily replicate. It's important to note that financial success is far from guaranteed in solo game development. For every Minecraft or Stardew Valley that makes creators wealthy, there are thousands and thousands of solo developed games that struggle to find an audience or recoup their development cost. Most successful solo developers recommend having significant savings or alternative income sources in order to sustain yourself during development. However, the potential rewards, both financial and creative, can be life-changing for those who achieve success. The royalty rates for independent developers are typically much higher than what employees at large studios receive, meaning that a successful indie game can provide financial security for years or even decades. So what can we learn from these incredible stories of solo game development? Whether you're an aspiring game developer or just someone interested in creative achievement, there are valuable lessons in these journeys. The most obvious lesson, I think, is the importance of genuine passion for your project. Every successful solo developer talks about working long hours, facing seemingly impossible technical challenges, and persevering through months or years of uncertainty. The only thing that sustains this kind of effort is deep personal investment in the project. But it's not just passion for games in general, it's passion for the specific game that you're creating. Another encouraging lesson is that technical skills are learnable now. Most of these developers weren't born knowing how to program or create art. They learned these skills because they needed them for their projects. In an age of abundant online educational resources, the main barriers to learning are time and motivation, not access to information. Working alone forces developers to be creative about solving problems. When you can't hire a team of artists to create hundreds of character animations, you find artistic ways to convey character through limited assets. When you can't afford to license expensive middleware, you design simpler systems that are easier to implement and maintain. These constraints often lead to more creative and memorable solutions than unlimited resources would. For example, the glitch mechanics in Axiom Verge emerged partly from technical limitations, but became one of the game's most distinctive features. Papers, Please's deliberately clunky interface turned limitations into artistic statements. Despite working alone, successful solo developers emphasize the importance of community, whether it's sharing development updates on social media or participating in game development forums, even simply just having friends and family who provide emotional support. No one truly succeeds in complete isolation. The game development community is generally supportive of solo developers, partly because many professional developers dream of creating their own independent projects. This network of mutual support and shared knowledge is crucial for navigating the challenges of solo development. The stories of solo game developers remind us of something important about human creativity and determination. In an industry increasingly dominated by massive corporations and $100 million budgets, individual creators are still capable of producing work that resonates with millions of people and influences the entire medium. These games succeed not despite being made by one person, but because of it. They carry the unmistakable fingerprint of their creator's unique vision, personality, and creativity. They take risks that committees would never approve and explore ideas that focus groups would reject. So if you're working on your own creative project, whether it's a game, a book, a piece of music, or anything else, these stories offer both inspiration and practical guidance. The tools are available, the knowledge is accessible, and the distribution channels exist. The main ingredients you need to supply are passion, patience, and the willingness to learn as you go. And who knows, maybe the next solo developed game is being created right now by someone watching this video. And that would be pretty amazing. All right, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Peace out. Bye.